Okay, I think we're at the hour, and we have a couple of reminders. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for spending your Friday pre-President's Day. I hope everyone has a good Monday off. There are a couple of reminders for today. We have stage 3 of the ePortfolio due today, and we have only a couple submissions in so far, so just a gentle reminder to everyone to get those in. Ashley, do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Just that, certainly it's easy to get behind. So we certainly just want to encourage and make sure that you're progressing. I think that's why we have kind of timelines, so it doesn't catch up with you later. So next week I'll go in and review them and give you some feedback. Certainly by the end of next week, kind of pushes it a bit. And then I kind of let JP, I make him aware of people who are delayed. So certainly, try to work on that, getting those submitted this week. You have the reminders via Smartsheet. So,
and I think for the next meeting in a month, we have people who are going to talk about some of their redesign work, but also they'll have some time to help us kind of review some of the work we've done on our portfolios. So it'd be nice to have some to show for next time. So I might have 3 or so voluntold people that can share out. And can you talk a little bit about the lit RFP that's coming out?
Sure. I just kind of confirmed with JP there. We're certainly anticipating that we will be funded. JP has received, good confirmation. I mean, nothing is confirmed until it's confirmed, I suppose, but anticipating releasing it early March. I did confirm that it would be open for 4 weeks because I've seen RFPs where it's 2 weeks and it's just such a crunch. So it will be open for 4 weeks. And then with it being released early March, I anticipate that it'll be due sometime in April, whether it's early or mid. So certainly what you can do to kind of promote, encourage, get the word out there, that would be fantastic. So it looks like our next meeting date is March 15th, which would be kind of timely as well, where you had suggested, possibly having other colleagues maybe join us for the PLC. I think that was just brought up to just kind of so they can get a feel for some of the components, the process and requirements, and the good discussion, right?
Yeah, I don't know if anyone else is kind of on the same page. So I think that the LIT is kind of at a program stage where it wants to share out or have departments more coordinating and working together. Correct me if I'm wrong on that.
I believe so.
The person we have a physicist and a chemist who will be the discussion speakers the next time that we call in, and Joy Goto, she's the chair of our chemistry department. They are talking for the first time about across all of the non-major intro chemistry labs of doing a redesign. So this will be very helpful for her hearing from this community, but also in turn, I think getting the word out and asking people to join in the next couple of meetings, and especially maybe the final workshop where we're all presenting. I think that having people there that aren't quite aware of what virtual labs are or what they can offer, getting people there would be really helpful for the system. All right. And then I think there's another slide you have on here.
Yeah, so just a reminder as well to take the time to do, a few sentences on a Google update. So with the idea that most of you have launched your semester quarter course, the redesign course, maybe the updates, you might kind of identify some of those challenges, successes thus far, that. And then I do need to put in another URL in here in just a second. I've got to create a tiny for it because it's kind of long. But JP did develop a spreadsheet where you could sign up for your time frame.
I put that in the chat box.
Presentations. Do you have that in chat?
Yeah.
Ooh, fantastic. Then I won't. So I'll just add it in here just on the slide then. Sign up for What are the dates for that?
Yeah, it is. I was just looking at that. May 21st and May 22nd. And in the spreadsheet, it's which day and which hour.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so if you want to be one of the first to present or one of the last to present, you can go in and claim your spot before anyone else does.
So if we can leave maybe this last slide up, Brett or Beth, for a couple minutes to
Yeah,
give people time to do that. Okay.
and I'm putting that updates. I think that's the right link. So I put the update link in there as well. I typed it in, so I hope there are no typos.
Okay.
So if everyone who's online, except for our distinguished speaker, if you can go into the spreadsheet and sign up for a time. Again, this is an amorphous document. You can move it around, but it would be nice to get some times in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and certainly if you don't know your presentation title, maybe your original title might have been pretty long, or you've done some changes or thoughts to that, so you could certainly fill that in a little later, but just give yourself a time slot maybe.
Yeah.
Then the abstract, I suspect that you might create that in a text document and maybe have a link to that, or I'm not sure in the abstract if it's paragraph format perhaps, or maybe we just have a concise paragraph.
So we'd like the abstracts finished by March 15th, if possible. I think that would give a good lead time to actually promote out to other people.
Yeah, and we do already have the, your department chair and dean identified, because you did that in your RFP proposals. So that'll be easy to generate or solicit them to attend. But you certainly, could remind them of it and be like, oh, it'd be great if you came, show your support.
Okay.
Looks like we're missing a few people, Beth. Or do we have? Is everybody here?
It looks like 14.
Oh, good. Fabulous. Okay.
I don't see 14 people in the document though.
No, I think I'm going to create a tiny for that real quick, because that's going to bug me. Because I know you can use a tiny when you also remind them in a couple weeks or another week or so too.
Oh no, go back to the tiny.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was dumb.
I really like that.
I forgot I was on screen share still. That's a Y. Although it looks like a V at the end, it's a Y.
Y. Okay, let me just make sure that's right. I think that's right. Yeah. Okay, so again, I typed in the tiny link, the big link. You can get there both ways. And I'm looking for a couple more people to go into the document and sign up for a time. There we go.
I'm in there. I don't see any sign-ups, but you're probably looking at your calendars as well in May, I suspect, right?
And again, the conference is 2 days. We have the first day, the second day, the 21st, the 22nd. And we have hourly time slots throughout those days that will be available. And depending upon when you feel the most comfortable going, the beginning, the middle, the end, I would just take one of those time slots. Again, they're changeable, but it'd be nice to get some names signed up. Oh, cool. Oh, cool. It looks like a lot of implementation. So Ben sent an email. I'll ask him to, he wasn't able to be here today, but he did give an update. I can forward it to you.
Do you want to copy and paste it in Google?
Yeah. Huh. He says that he completed the update.
He probably did the media
Last
report,
one.
maybe.
Maybe it's on the previous one?
No, because that would be December.
All right, let me ask him.
It's a running log.
All right, it looks like we have a couple people signed up. I'm keeping an eye on the time. We do have a speaker for today, Chris Tassone from, I'm not sure how to say, Sama?
Yeah.
Sama Learning is here. And it sounds like he and Camby's are academically related somehow, which is pretty cool. And talking about related, Camby's is a new dad. So just a shout out to Camby's.
Hey.
All right. And while you guys are gonna finish up claiming spots and filling in your updates, again, this is implementation time. Share out anything and everything that you're doing. It's really helpful for us to see what you're doing so we can gauge what you guys need. And we have Chris Tassone here. So he actually contacted me and asked to talk to this community. And I'm really curious. I don't know, admittedly, too much about Sama. And so thank you, Chris, for coming, reaching out to us. And I'm really curious to learn.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for the opportunity. There's a reason for that. So Sama has been kind of working with our heads down in the dark. Let's see, are those slides showing up for people? Perfect. Just quickly, by way of introduction for myself, I'm a chemist. I have a PhD in chemistry from UCLA, and that's how Camby's and I are academically related. And I run a research group at Slack National Lab as my day job, and we focus on developing in situ characterization methods and utilizing and developing artificial intelligence tools to help automate discovery of new materials for things in the energy space. So Slack is a DOE funded national lab, and so everything we do is some tie into energy. The idea for Sama actually came about 3 years ago. I was driving down here to teach a course on light matter interaction, and I was listening to a podcast reporting on what had come out of the Consumer Electronics Show, and they were talking about VR. And I just was working through my lecture notes while I listened to this podcast and realized I was going to write Fourier transforms on a board for 50 minutes straight. And out of the 50 kids that were going to be in my section, I thought maybe 2 or 3 of them would understand anything about what I was talking about. And it was just one of those aha moments of, wait a second, if I could put these students on the lattice, maybe they still won't all get the math, but at least they'll understand scattering, constructive interference, and destructive interference, and all these things. And so from there, went into a period of kind of workshopping the idea and started working with my co-founder, Barb, who's on the call here as well. Sorry to pass along the invite if that's all right. And we founded the company around an idea that, or around, let's see if I can get back to the slide deck. There we go. Around a problem that I'm sure you guys are all familiar with, which is this major STEM retention gap that we have in the United States. The 2011 report out of the Obama White House saying we needed 1 million more STEM graduates by 2020. And the recommendation, one of the recommendations in that report was, it's not that we need to build more infrastructure in the university system in terms of housing more students into the pipeline, but that we're losing a lot of students out of the pipeline. And I'm sure anyone who has taught a general education STEM history, general ed STEM course has seen the dismay on students' faces, and I certainly have as well. And then we also recognize that, you know, I would say, like, I'm an academically minded person. My primary goal for this company was, let's make STEM more accessible to more people and get more people educated in how the physical world around them works. And then at the same time, we recognize that there's a business opportunity for the universities of retaining more students and capturing that revenue. So this was the foundation of Sama Learning. Like I mentioned before, my background is in chemistry. And over the last 3 years, I've tried to get myself a secondary degree in education theory, or education science and cognitive theory. And so there's been a ton of research that I'm sure I don't need to preach to this group on about what methods work to turn levers into stayers. So diversified teaching methods, tracking the outcomes of your students is obviously a huge one. So evidence-based teaching, working on mathematical competency in those general education classes. So, you know, when I'm teaching chemistry or physics, I oftentimes took the case of, it's not my job to teach you math. You need to learn math on your own and then come prepared for this class. But, you know, the numbers are in and that doesn't work super well. And then really focusing on those general education classes, because that's where people are moving into different majors or leaving the university system. And then doing all of this to really create learning communities. And what we can't do is what the two pictures on the bottom are supposed to illustrate, which is we can't just keep doing the exact same thing and expect different results. And so our classroom hasn't changed by and large, and this is in no means to denigrate any of the efforts of this group, because I'm sure you guys are doing all kinds of amazing things. But if we look across the university and higher ed landscape, the majority of students' experiences still stays on a stage. And so we can do better than that. And when we look at what are things that are shown to work very well to turn levers into stayers. So it was nice to hear people talking about reworking their pedagogy and curriculum. So introducing active learning absolutely decreases failure rates hugely. Problem-based inquiry is another tool that has shown similar effectiveness. Use of digital tools and simulations to build the shared visual constructs are known to work. And then use of assessment and feedback to develop that metacognitive understanding. So these are really like the pillars that we're trying to build on. And then the last thing I would note is, even when you're introducing these kind of tools, there's a little bit of research there out on the graph on the right that shows as you increase the immersiveness of the digital tools, the student outcomes are better. So the learning outcomes in this particular study were only marginally better, but the decrease of boredom and flow was significant. And so we have to fight a battle not only with their ability to understand, students' ability to understand the material, but with their engagement level. And so doing this background research on what are effective ways to engage more students, improve their learning outcomes, etc., we then wanted to look, what does VR bring to the table that is unique about this? And so the one that is kind of immediately obvious is the advanced visualization capable in VR is just never been possible. So one could argue that a digital simulation on a computer screen in a 3D environment that you can interact with provides that same level of visualization. And all I would say to those people is go put on a headset because it is fundamentally different. And it is a very subjective and qualitative thing. But when you are interacting with a quantum mechanical atomic orbital in a virtual environment versus on a 2D screen, you internalize the structure of that in a way that is completely different. And so the advanced visualization is the thing that's immediately apparent. But we wanted to move beyond just that. And so the second piece is, why don't we build a pedagogy around these advanced digital simulations that are immersive and interactable, that includes active learning, problem-based inquiry. Sorry, the storm just kicked up here, so if you guys hear thunder, I apologize. So we can include all of these known learning interventions in a structured lesson that isn't just presenting a digital simulation and then asking the instructors to do all the work of how to implement. And then the last piece is VR is a kind of an ideal place to integrate assessment into the process. And so what you end up with then is, if I look across, I can use all of these things in VR to build standalone lessons that instructors can just drop in alongside everything that they're doing already, and will improve the student engagement and their learning outcomes. And so that's what we're building here at Sama Learning. So the first piece of that puzzle is this curriculum library. And that's where our initial efforts have been. We are firmly rooted in the belief that everything we release on the Sama platform is going to have validated evidence that it improves learning outcomes. And so we didn't want to start by just releasing content creation tools out into the wild. We wanted to develop and validate our framework for how we move content into VR. And we're doing that through the staged release of a series of content courses that are initially going to target general ed chemistry, physics, biology, and calculus. And then we recognize that if you ask 10 instructors how they want to teach the material, you're going to get 10 different answers. And so we have to put content creation and publishing tools out into the world. But I'm not talking about giving you like Photoshop. It would be if I gave you Photoshop with a structure that told you how to build perspective into your art. And so it's not only the tools that allow you to make these cool digital simulations without having to know how to code in Unity, but it's also how lessons can be structured, where assessments should be baked in, where active learning can be introduced, and where narrative makes sense to incorporate. Another piece of the platform is reporting dashboards. So we do have overt assessments in our courseware right now. So where the students are presented with a problem and asked to solve it. That generates a rubric for each student on their mastery. But one of the amazing things about VR is because we can build these really structured learning environments, we're getting a wealth of information that enables stealth assessment and mastery-based learning in a way that's just fundamentally impossible on a traditional digital curriculum. And so we can use sequential learning tools to guide the students towards mastery, but we also are getting information about their mastery from things they're doing outside of just problem solving. And so the dashboards are meant to present information to the students about what they did well in and what they need to go back and work on, and for the instructors to understand how they should be spending their time on which concepts and reinforcement. And this reporting dashboard is ultimately driven by the assessment and analytics tools that are in the back end of every piece of content that the students are interacting with. And then the last piece is this social spaces. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the deployments we've done over the last couple of year and a half. But one of the things we recognized is right now all of our tools are one student, one headset. And something is something is lost. And it's really obvious when you're sitting in a classroom full of 25 students not talking to each other in a headset that it's a missed opportunity. And so we are reworking the architecture of our platform so that it's a client-server architecture so that we can have student to student, student to teacher, and student to tutor interactions kind of on demand. And then also as part of that, a create and share functionality so that students can access content they experienced in VR on either a mobile or a web platform. So we realize the VR footprint's not where we'd love it to be yet. So we got to build in tools for that. And I would also say, I should have said at the top, I'm going to walk through these slides. If anyone has questions or wants to interrupt, that's fine. If you guys want to have a conversation at the end, these slides are really going to take me like 15 or 20 minutes. So there should be time for discussion. And there's a much deeper dive we can do into some of the results. Afterwards, this is kind of just a high-level summary. So me being a scientist, we asked ourselves the question, will this work first? So we built an early prototype for the HTC Vive that was teaching atomic orbital theory for the first semester of general chemistry. And we deployed that at Stanford, Loyola Marymount, and Chico State. And that pilot program had 93 students run through it purely from the scaling limitations of using a Vive. And then in the following fall, which was this past fall of 2019, we ported that lesson to the Lenovo Mirage Solo, which is a standalone VR headset with inside-out tracking, which means you don't need a computer, you don't need sensors, you don't need anything, but it still has 6 degrees of freedom and input schemes, so you can control things in that hardware. And then we ran pilots again at those same 3 schools in order to ask 2 questions. One, can we run VR in the classroom at the scale that's necessary to reach, the size of classes that exists? And 2, do we see learning outcome improvements for students? So those were the 2 primary questions we were asking. Of those 3 schools, we had 100% enrollment from Stanford and Chico, and Loyola was slightly different. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. So we had a couple of different implementation approaches. So this picture over here in the top left is what the deployment looked like at Chico State. So we took an old room they used to generate video content as part of their communications courses. And we just stuck 25 chairs in there and ran batches of students 25 at a time. It was a mandated activity. They got points for participating in it. And we had a 99% attendance out of the enrollment. So that was something like 417 students that we ran through in 3 days. Stanford, which is the picture down here at the bottom, used a different approach. And this might be more interesting to you guys, since I know you guys are thinking about immersive technologies as lab replacement. So Stanford integrated the VR activity into the lab, which accompanies their first semester of general chemistry. And the way they did that was to split the labs half and half. So half the students were running in a VR activity for an hour, and half the students were doing a UV Viz experiment, and then they swapped. And so we were running 36 students at a time in headsets. So we were able to do a throughput of, 74 students an hour in VR. And they created a worksheet that went along with it to kind of remap what they were learning in VR back onto how they're going to be assessed on the midterm. And then Loyola Marymount used, again, a different implementation, which was the headsets were housed in a conference room location that wasn't being used, and they assigned it like homework, and students could volunteer to use it or not. There were batches of anywhere from 5 to 12 students coming in at the different time slots, with a total student population of 37 that tried it there. And then a control group that was run there. So we assessed learning in a couple of different ways for these different groups. So because Chico had all of their students attend, we could only do a pre-post testing scheme. So we didn't have access to a control group there. But at Loyola Marymount, they were really interested in running a more controlled study. And so out of the, 79 volunteers who said, yes, I'd be interested in trying VR, we randomly assigned them to either a control or an experimental group, and half of those students were in the experimental cohort. And I'm going to show data here from the Loyola cohort, but this data tracks with the pre-post, tracks quantitatively with the pre-post results as well. So in the graph in the top right, this is a quiz that all of the students got, that 76 student population, on the material for quantum mechanics. This was designed by Robert Center, who's the professor down at Loyola Marymount. And we're just showing when this quiz was graded collectively, how the students performed with the use of the VR curriculum and without the use of the VR curriculum. And so we see basically a shift in the mean of a full letter grade, and we see a reduction of the failure rate to 0. Now this is a small n here, so take from it what you will. But this tracks quantitatively with the pre-post testing scheme. So at Chico, when we do the same analysis across 418 students, we see an improvement of a full letter grade in the student outcomes from a pre-test to a post-test.
What was what were the assessment items like? How many items were there? What level were they assessing at in general?
Yeah, so this was a 12-question quiz. I'd actually be happy to share out what that quiz looked like with anybody who wants it. The mean on the pretest was 40%. And then the mean on the post-test was 68%. Standard deviation was about 17% in both those cases. Or sorry, 17 points. And this test did not, the questions were not assessed via like a Bloom's taxonomy, if that's the question you're asking. So one of the nice things about the pre-post testing methodology was that we could track individual student outcomes. And what we saw is 92% of the students who used the tool showed some improvement. And the number of students who were in the failing DNF category on the pretest showed a much more significant improvement than the average or the A students. And so this is exactly what we were hoping to see. Is it's not that we want to improve the outcomes of the A students, that we want the DNF students to get pulled up. And we saw that. So this is this qualitative statement, most effective for the forest performers. Again, I'm happy to share out the detailed data with anybody. The only socioeconomic factor we collected was gender, and we didn't see any gender dependence, which is not something we expected. And then we had a range of student population from 17 out to, I think, 26. We didn't see any statistically significant dependence on age. Again, not something we would expect to see. Okay, and there was a host of qualitative data that we collected as well. This is just a snapshot of it. When asked the question, did they think...
Sorry. I apologize for interrupting again.
Please.
Was there similar data collected for the Stanford study?
Sorry. Yeah, that's a great question. So at Stanford, we did not collect any data because Stanford's position was we just wanted to use this. And so they will take all the lessons that we're giving. They didn't need any data to report back to the administration to convince them to make the spend. And so they were basically just happy to use the software and didn't want to do anything like that.
So no assessments at all from Stanford?
Only qualitative student responses as part of the end of class survey. Asking similar questions to this is how they viewed VR as being effective or not effective to their learning. Would they want to see it? What frequency would they want to see it? Okay. But no learning outcome assessment. So I think these points were, for us, just what we were trying to get at. How did the students view this? We collected data asking how they viewed this relative to other types of things like problem sets, small group discussions, etc. VR tended to be highly ranked in those cases. One of the interesting points from us, which is why we highlighted it, is almost all the students would have wanted to revisit this outside of class time. So if they had access to it, they would use it. And then this last piece is just a word cloud. The last question we asked them is what other courses they've taken that they'd like to see VR activities introduced into. And you can see it kind of spans all over the place. But the core STEM subjects are really folded, and it tends to be immediately apparent to students and instructors, when we put them in one of our lessons. The first question is, well, I'm teaching this other thing over here. When can I get this? Oh, and that dovetails. Hey, that was accidental. So this is the planned rollout for the products that we're developing right now. So we've done everything to date with a single lesson that we piloted. I should have mentioned the average time in the lesson was 42 minutes that students were spending in there. The longest time we saw was 2 hours from one of the students at Chico. And the shortest time we saw was 14 minutes. we have, from this fall's pilot, we've kind of settled internally on targeting a 30-minute experience seems to be ideal from an implementation perspective, because that leaves room in a standard 50-minute discussion for something else to reinforce what they learned or for them to pivot. And then for the integrated labs, it also makes it work quite nicely. And then one of the kind of just a logistical piece, right now the standalone headset hardware is a little bit heavy and clunky. Beyond 30 minutes, students will start to report like neck strain as being a little bit of an issue. In fall 2019, we're going to roll out our first product, which is a suite of 8 lessons that are meant to cover the major pain points in the first semester of general chemistry. And we're following that up with the spring semester with the second semester of chemistry, the first 6 highest impact lessons in physics, and similarly for biology. And then we expect to have the full kind of GE STEM course rolled out by fall 2020. So that'll be the second half of physics, second half of biology. OChem is literally the single most requested thing that we have, or has been requested of us. And then we're ending with calculus as the next product that we'll develop. So I just want to say one thing about that, which is, reading through the literature on retention, it's really clear that addressing math is probably like the single best thing someone could do. But it is also by far the most difficult. And so part of the reason for us to target chemistry and physics and biology initially is that we will have developed a suite of applied math problems and had a large scope of different types of students at different preparedness levels interacting with those. And then we can use the learning from that to guide how we approach using VR for calculus and even remediation for pre-calc. Yeah, it's the thing, like calculus is kind of our golden cow, but we want to make sure we do it right. And they're also, I've talked to a lot of professors in the math departments at Stanford and Berkeley around here. And calculus is going to be a really fine line to walk, because there's definitely a camp of people who would say like, yeah, general ed calculus should just all be applied. And then there's the far other end of the spectrum, which is saying like, no, the theory of how they do these things is the most important thing that my students are going to take away from this. And so walking that line is going to be critically important. And one of the requests I would make out to this group is, because all of these things are being developed right now, where people have positive experiences or where they even just have suggestions or thoughts on how to craft these things, we are super open to all of that. What we've done to date has been done in collaboration with the professors at all the universities we've been working with. And what lessons we are building is guided by input from the community. So I'm not trying to build a set of tools and then shove them down someone's throat. We really are trying to build things that are requested by our users. And there's actually like quite a bit of flexibility in what specific perceived pain points people have, making sure we build a simulation that meets the needs of it. So that is all I had by way of introduction. This is the team of people behind us, and we actually just hired another developer whose picture is not on here yet, Justin Busan. Yeah, so thank you guys so much, and happy to answer any questions you guys might have.
Thank you, Chris. That was really great. Any questions?
So what is the model for how you would go about, starting up a collaboration with academic partners that want to build content?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, so I actually almost put the content creation tools on that timeline. We expect those to roll out fall 2020. The model that we are currently, I would say, scrutinizing is a revenue share model with the professors who author the content.
So with individual professors, then not really with the institutions.
It is conceivable to go either way, although in my experience, albeit limited, most of the time content is authored by specific individuals, right? So if you look at Smart Sparrow as an example, it's a digital curriculum provider. They build partnerships with individual instructors who author digital lessons on their platform. Yeah.
How much do you see, what's the licensing like? How much will it cost the students?
Yeah, so right now, we are using a software as service for the business model. The target cost is going to be $50 per student per year. That will not be the cost that we come to market with, because we won't have the full feature set. So the adaptive learning algorithms, for instance, aren't part of the content right now. And so in the fall, when we come to market, we're looking at a $20 per student cost.
Is that for one class or for all?
Yes, sorry, for one class.
One class, okay.
And sorry, one class does not mean one lesson. So that would be $20 per student for those 8 lessons for general chemistry. And we are open to discussion around some of that. There is potentially some flexibility. And so, yeah, I would say if this is of interest, we should talk further, because we really see an opportunity within the Cal State system to, like, so just to be like totally frank, we've been at a lot of different schools. The Cal State system has been, we think, pretty progressive. There's a lot of departments rewriting their curriculum right now. It's kind of an ideal time for us to work with you guys to get these tools. And the support from centrally from the chancellor's office for driving these retention issues, we see it being there. And so I kind of think there's an opportunity for us to work closely with you guys to show how this should look, right? And then, yeah.
One more question. So Google is funding, I assume, some parts of this?
No, so Google, the partnership that we had with Google was purely they provided the hardware for us to run the pilots on.
Okay.
So they provided the 36 headsets that we used across the 3 universities.
So they're not funding the content creation, or, you know.
They are not. So the impetus for the partnership with Google was they are really interested in the similar types of data that demonstrate a use case for VR in education. And since we were going out and collecting exactly that kind of data, they were happy to provide the hardware.
They're also interested in making sure that you use their headsets, I'm sure.
Yes. So that's something I didn't get to. We are totally hardware agnostic right now. So we do have a small team of developers, so we are picking things that we're developing for. That said, we took that lesson that we ran the pilots on and we're porting it back to the Vive so that the chemistry department there can run it on the existing hardware that they have.
So the Vive, if you had your choice, what would you choose in terms of hardware?
If I had my choice, I would choose the Oculus Quest, which is not out yet. But it will be a standalone headset with 6 degrees of freedom for both the headset and 2 input devices. So it's all the functionality of the Vive at probably a fifth of the total cost. Its form factor is very comfortable to wear. The resolution is good. Again, we are not getting money from Oculus, but having tried that HTC standalone, the Lenovo, I think the Quest seems to be the best, and it's at the right price point at $400. I think you can do, we were incredibly concerned with moving from the Vive to the Mirage Solo for the loss of interactivity. But it was the only headset on the market when we needed to do this deployment. And so basically it was like, well, we're either going to trade off like helping 2 students at a time or 100 students at a time. And I'd rather help 100 students slightly than 2 a lot. And it actually shook out that we didn't see any change in the learning outcome improvement moving to the less immersive system. That said, we also changed a ton in the structure of the lesson. So integrated assessments weren't a part of it previously. The structure was slightly different, so the scaffold that we used had been changed. So it's hard to assess what role immersion played in that.
Hmm. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm curious. So we started off talking a little bit about equity, and I'm curious if you have any data showing that there's equity gap closures or anything like that.
We don't, because we didn't collect that data. So this is one of the things looking forward that we are going to be focused on.
Yeah, so I'm thinking, we were looking at the 2025. So the CSU is really driven by this 2025 initiative.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like you guys have heard about that.
Yep.
One of the things that we'd like to do, and I think we see it across all the campuses, there's a dashboard that the CSU uses. I don't know if you can go to the CSU webpage and if they have like the data available, but you can kind of see campus to campus what the big bottlenecks are, where the biggest equity gaps are. And in looking through that this morning, it looked to me like there was always this chemistry class that came up, and it had always the biggest, no matter how you disaggregated it, URM, Pell eligible. And so these are the courses where not only, these grade improvements matter, but also like if you propagate that up, we were looking at the likelihood. So people are doing the predictive analytics,
Mm-hmm.
the likelihood of students to graduate on time if they have a DWF. And so when you're moving the GPA, like you're showing, if that's propagated through the system, you could actually like really change the graduation rate. And so if you're able to show CSU how like the impact of that, I think that that would be really helpful for the system.
So if JP is still on the line, I know you guys were talking about this coming FWP.
Yeah, I don't think he's on the line, but I do have this report.
I am actually. I'm listening in.
Oh, good.
So I think like this would be something I think we would be look to partner with you guys on. From our perspective, for us to continue to exist as a company and build all of these things that we think are going to make a difference, we have to show some amount of customer acquisition. Now that can be like through an FWP that is funded to buy the hardware and subscribe to the software to run one of these studies, let's say at a reduced rate. That's a mechanism that we could for sure think about. And even potentially help support some amount of the research that's happening on campus.
Yeah, I think that it's really hard for me to figure out always where there's funding. And so we have these resources and what you're doing to me, I just remember like seeing the image of equity versus equality. Mm-hmm. And the stick figure standing on top of the boxes in each, and showing that equity really means that you're giving students what they need. Mm-hmm. And you're making something that could potentially really help even the playing field between students who have had immersive experiences or have had like a lot of prep and privilege growing up through life versus, most of our students, a good half of them are, or 70, half to 70% are really, they're amazingly coming from these disadvantaged backgrounds. Mm-hmm. And so in thinking of that equity, that giving students what they need, especially during those first 2 years of those GE STEM courses, which are big bottlenecks, I think that this could be justified for funding. I'm not sure exactly how yet. I'm just thinking like there's money for disadvantaged communities to give them more access to broadband. So this idea of tackling or tying together disadvantaged populations with technology and helping them that way. Mm-hmm. I feel like, sorry.
On the note of how, the California Learning Labs funding mechanism that the governor's office has just put out has exactly that in mind. So,
yeah.
That would be an ideal opportunity, I think, for a partnership.
Yeah. So that's what What was that called again? California?
The California Learning Labs, and it's actually the final submission deadline is March 22nd. It's something that was distributed to UC, CSU, and California community colleges over the past few months.
Would you see SAMA as kind of being a lead on that, or would that be like the CSU putting together something?
Well, so it's mostly led by faculty teams at ideally more than one. So they encourage sort of across the board collaboration between UC, CSU, and community colleges to try and develop tools to address equity issues in STEM. That's the main objective.
There might be something there. I'd be really interested.
They were also looking for a component of active learning also.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And adaptive learning. Adaptive learning is a big element to this year's RFP.
So I'll put a note. Something that's also going to be an issue is the issue of accessibility.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was one of my questions. So the universal learning design or something, or
I think, Chris, there is a period where folks are willing to say these are emerging technologies, so we shouldn't look at all of these aspects because they are emerging, so we don't know where they're going to pan out. But at some point, the rubber hits the road, and it's difficult to continue using a technology if it doesn't meet accessibility.
Yeah, definitely.
That's in my view in the emerging side right now. So there is a little bit of a space where you are not being held to the same standard as an established technology that's been around, but that's coming.
Yeah, so we were talking about this with Justin Litt at Sonoma State a bit, and we're actually working through, I forget the name of the form template for whatever it's called.
It's a VPAT.
Yes, the VPAT. That is a lovely, wonderful form that isn't make me want to bash my head into my desk at all. But yeah, so in terms of accessibility, just so you guys know, the one type of student who we have, or one disability who we have not been able to deal with is severely impaired eyesight to the point of blindness. So that it's hard for me to foresee how we handle that.
So that's where I don't know if that's learning, that social component comes in. So I teach geology, and I had a blind student in geology, and most of everything we do, especially like the middle of the earth or outer space, like I don't know how to teach that without visuals. She actually was able, there were students in the class that would describe to her what they were seeing. And so actually it made a more social learning environment where multiple people benefited. And so if you had that kind of social capacity on the software where students could work together, like I could see them still describing to one of their classmates.
Yeah, so that's certainly a potential solution. In terms of other physical handicaps, other learning disabilities, we've had a slew of people with sets of learning disabilities that actually reported this increased their accessibility. And then people who cannot walk can still use the software fine. So this is something we design into the core of the tools, is that there is a mechanism to bring the world to you. And that's also partially driven by thinking forward to, if there were 300 students in a lecture hall with headsets on, you can't have them walking around. Or I guess you could, but that would probably be bad.
So unfortunately, we're at the top of the hour. This was really great. Thank you guys so much for spending an afternoon with us and really helping us unbash our heads across the wall. Looking at the future, these emerging technologies really do show us that, yeah, there's so much potential and so much still to do.
That's great. And Will shares the slides with the team, as well as some links to videos and that sort of thing. So, and also a follow-up call. There's some folks that want to have some further discussion. So
yeah, it sounds like there's a chat box full of physics, engineering folks who want to talk to you guys.
Great.
Yeah, totally.
If I may take 1 minute, is that, you can give me 1 minute, a couple. So Chris and Barbara, just like any other technology, we are the chancellor's office. We only facilitate campus using. So you need to do the legwork with faculty on the campuses so that they see value in your product and they're at least willing to pilot, if not adopt your product. Aside from that, it's difficult for us to do anything because that would be telling campus what to do. So you need to work on folks like Camby's, Dennis, the folks that are here, Paul. So the legwork is yours, honestly. And then once there is value, these folks are very vocal at letting us know this is something valuable.
I think it's worth, I don't know, in terms of the legwork, actually, when you're giving the presentation, each campus has a learning center or some kind of
faculty development center. I think that's a good place.
Yeah, I would totally, you can look at that list and get their emails, and I would talk to those people, have them more aware of what you guys are doing. I can send that to you.
Okay. Yeah, that all sounds great. And please reach out, any of you guys, if there's opportunities for partnership. We're really willing to figure out how to make things work.
Yeah, we can give you as one of the potential ideas for faculty who are going to actually apply for the next RFP. So, and again, you're part of our list now of virtual labs, and people will have your information. But if you can reach out to the different campuses and the technology officers on those campuses, Fresno State particularly is Discovery. It's supposed to be a tablet or technology enabled learning environment. And so they have a technology officer and a line item, and that might be a really good person to talk to.
Okay, will do. Thank you guys so much for the opportunity, and
yeah, this is great stuff. This is great. I want to see it in my room.
So just send me an email. We're driving all over the state all the time. We can bring you something. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you guys.
So Chris,
yeah.
Would it be possible to actually test out the VR experiences?
Yeah, so sorry, that's the thing I should have said. So if you have hardware on your